Hello YouTube and Patreon, this is Nathan P. Butler, and this is our project update for the month of January 2020. It's been a relatively slow month overall, at least as far as actually pushing things out the door, though there are some things that are recorded now I still need to edit that will eventually get out the door. You may notice that we've done some reorganizing again in the background here. Basically, the last reorganization had been to put big, super tall project boards back here in place of the little foam boards that I had back here before, so that it covers a little bit higher than it did before, which keeps Cade from being able to actually get to a lot of the stuff. He was actually getting to that one down here, like this little area down here, that row of shelves, which resulted in a lot of no and taking stuff away. So now that's blocked a little bit better, but then I also had an opportunity to switch some stuff around. So over here against the wall, there are two big black bookshelves on either side of a window that is the same size as this set of shelves. Previously, my Star Wars books were over on those shelves. Now the Legend stuff is pretty much out the door, except for the stuff I decided to keep, like signed stuff, advanced uncorrected proof copies, some of the guidebooks and that sort of thing, the manga stuff, the choose your own adventure stuff, whatever was just something I preferred to keep, basically. And then that still took up a lot of space. I went through recently and made the switch to approaching the canon stuff for Star Wars, not as a collection anymore, but instead as just me trying to get a chance to read everything, which is what it's really for in the first place. So I've switched to digital for comics and sold off all the canon comics. Actually to Ben Handelman, who is one of the, in fact, the first Patreon supporters that I have. And then I also went through with the books, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to start reading on Kindle. So the books have also gone out the door. Aside from the ones I decided to keep, this is the handful of things, which has resulted in having more space and being able to spread the home video collection out, but still, it didn't quite work as well as I had hoped because a lot of stuff was covered up by those boards to protect them from the baby getting to them or the toddler getting to them, and the books just took up a bunch of space without really being part of something I was trying to display, per se. So I went through, once everybody was asleep one night, and pulled all the books off my shelves. The books are now on the shelves that are covered by the project boards. The only shelves actually that aren't books, that are instead home video stuff for those, are the big, super tall, very bottom shelves of these two bottom ones, because that's where the laser discs and the big box sets are, like the Executor set. And then the shelf right underneath this one, in between those two, has some of the big games that have stuff in, like the Trivial Pursuit Star Wars thing that has the DVD and stuff in it. But otherwise, I was able to take the home video stuff out and spread it this way, move some of it upward, and now these shelves over on the side that you can't see do have home video stuff on them, but this is stuff that's less likely to be cool as a background display, like the tons of Spaceballs stuff, or the tons of fan-made documentaries, or unofficial documentaries, or even some official documentaries that just needed a place to be. And I'm still left with 1, 2, 3, 4 shelves, basically, that I can put more stuff on without having to rearrange anything. So the rearranging of the office here has finally started to slow down. Hopefully the next thing eventually will be when Cade, can understand don't touch, and maybe I can remove some of this background stuff that's protecting the stuff lower. So like I said, it's been a pretty slow month. We're at the beginning of a semester, so I'm overloaded with meet the teacher calls to students. I think I still have almost 100 of those left to do, even after 3 weeks of sort of non-stop calling from 4 to 8 every single night. My son just had to have surgery. My wife is coming up on having to have surgery. It's just not been a good, productive time. Plus, of course, you got the holidays mixed in there as well. So some new stuff out, not a ton of new stuff, not a ton of new work has been done, but there are a few things that are sort of on the way. They're just kind of sitting there ready to be edited, as has been the case in the past. So before we get into what actually did come out new from me within this last month, since our last update, which is actually, I believe, on December 29th of 2019, so a little later in the month than usual, whereas this one's more at around the normal time. I'm recording this one on the 6th? Yeah, I had to look at the computer. The 26th of January 2020. I do want to give thanks to those who are backers over on Patreon. And yes, by the way, I have finally started putting together the Patreon thanks page for the second edition of A Saga on Home Video. I'm still hoping to get that out later this year. We'll see. It'll probably be very late this year, if so. But one of the things I've started to do is put together the Patreon thanks page, which is that page where everybody who has ever been a supporter on Patreon, that $1 level on up, the travelers, the denizens, or the nobility, gets to be not just in the thanks of these videos here at the end, which I try to also say out loud in the videos while it's a manageable number of people. They also get onto that Patreon thanks page for a Saga on Home Video 2nd edition. And I've finally started pulling that together. In a couple of cases, I had to do some quick checks to make sure that usernames matched with the people that I thought they were. And in one case, we had someone who has successfully completed a transition. And I wanted to make sure that the name was listed correctly as well. So I'm slowly pulling that together. But if you're interested in that sort of thing, Patreon is the way to get on there. So the first tier on Patreon is the $1 tier. It's basically called the Travelers Through the Butlerniverse, and these are the folks that get a thanks here. They get a thanks in that special, Patreon thanks page in the next edition of the book. And there's not actually a whole lot of people in that category at this point. We have Ben P. Stein, Martin Dahl, S.W. Chris, and Austin Pierce. Then by far the biggest group are the denizens of the Butlerniverse. That's that $5 tier, the folks who get the stuff that the travelers get, but also get access to those audio commentaries I put together, at least 2 per month, typically on the 1st and the 15th. Again, biggest group, and we have some new faces in the group. So that group consists of, if you'll allow me to read my way up here since I haven't memorized it, we have Jason Hunt, Bobby Craig, Robert Medina, Chris Morgan, Sam Howard, Stephen Milicia. Did I say it correctly this time? Last time I said it a couple different ways, and you said I said it correctly, but I didn't know which one was correct. I just know it's not militia. So, Milicia? Is that correct? Then we have Joey Zitzman, Jeff Ellis, Chris Lewis, Jeremiah Mustard, Gary Sherwood, Kyle Pellery, Walker Langstrat, Andrew Gilbertson, Travis Taylor, who is now among us, and Daniel, I think I'm going to say this right, is it Marchant? Hopefully that's correct. M-A-R-C-H-A-N-T, but I'm pretty sure that's more of a French-leaning pronunciation than just a straight Anglo-type pronunciation. I don't think it's Marchant, I think it's Marchant, but we'll see. So let me know if I've said that correctly, Daniel, please. And then we have the nobility of the Butlerniverse. Those folks get what the denizens and the travelers both get, but also manage to get access to that exclusive Q&A video every single month that I put together early in the month based on questions submitted throughout that previous month. In this case, we have 6 folks who are considered the nobility of the Butlerniverse right now. We have Brian Snook, Aaron Melzak, Jonathan Confer, Ennis, Benjamin Handelman, and Andrew Bettis. So again, my thanks to all of you, and let's stick with Patreon for right now. If you're interested in the Patreon or any of the stuff being released through it, it is patreon.com/NathanPButler, all as one word. As you'd expect, we had 3 new releases this month through Patreon. We had that exclusive Q&A for the Nobility of the Butlerniverse, number 25 of those, which was released on January 4th. And then we, of course, had our 2 commentaries on January 1st and 15th. On the first, it was the commentary for Senate Murders. Now, that's kind of a big deal, I guess, because Senate Murders was that weird sort of out-of-place one from before the time jump that was actually taking place after the time jump, but we didn't know that back then, blah, blah, blah. So that item hanging over from Season 2 that's finally been taken care of to finish knocking those out, because we are doing them in chronological order. And then we got into one of the better trilogies that we've seen as far as arcs of the Clone Wars. On January 15th, we began the Asajj Ventress Savage Opress focused arc, what is thought of as the Night Sisters trilogy most of the time, and released that way as a feature film, actually, as well. We took a look at the episode Night Sisters. So, of course, Monster and Witches of the Mist are coming very, very soon. Yeah, if you're looking for that I used to say all the time when we talked about that episode on Republic Forces Radio Network, you will not be disappointed, but you'll have to wait to the end of that episode to run into it. I kept going through my head, but I held off. That does mean that the commentary is coming up in February. We're going to finish out the Asajj Ventress, Savage Opress, etc. Night Sisters trilogy. And then the next ones I'm going to record sometime, hopefully this week, once everybody's asleep, and I can come in here and do it, is Woosah. It's the Mortis trilogy. Those of you who are familiar with me and have listened to the podcasts I've been on over the years know that I am not a big fan of the Mortis trilogy. But I find that my opinion has gotten a little bit better over time because I've always enjoyed the first 2 episodes, although they throw out everything that Lucas had previously said about what balance in the Force actually meant to get something completely different that actually makes more sense, but is still completely different than what he had ever said before at the time. And then the 3rd episode has always driven me nuts because it throws away the rules and the motivations as developed in the previous 2 episodes for an ending that it assumes things that we don't see on screen in order for it to make any sense at all. Because either they threw out their own rules, and now you get an episode that just is kind of like, wait, what? And it clashes with the other 2, or you have to assume certain characters ignorant of some pretty basic important stuff in order to make the ending make sense for the father and the son. But I look forward to getting into that. I actually went through, most of the time with these commentaries, I'll take my notes, but I'll take my notes using, episode guides and things like that just to remind myself of stuff I want to say, or I'll go on Wikipedia and remind myself of who the cast was and do some IMDb searches and whatnot for them. But typically I don't watch the episode before I then jump back into it for the commentary because I want that fresh feeling as I'm watching it and trying to also work in my notes as I'm recording. But this time, I really wanted to make sure I rewatched it because it's something I've been so negative on in the past, and I wanted to see if I really was right that the ending throws out the rules from the first 2. And it pretty much does, but it can make sense if you assume, again, some facts not in evidence, some things that just hadn't been said that are kind of hinted at in a couple of lines after the climax has already happened, to sort of make it make sense retroactively. So I look forward to recording those. That'll be soon, and then those would be released, I guess, as the commentaries in March, and the first one in April, I suppose. So, so if I'm right, that would mean that the one that drives me nuts, the last part of it, would be released on April Fool's Day. How appropriate is that? Anyway, so just be looking out for those if you are a person who is a backer over there on Patreon, because you will see those all coming up very, very soon. And let's see, beyond that, podcast-wise, no news yet still on me recording with Michael Morris for Cloud City Casino. I must say, Cloud City Casino is one of these things where I kind of feel like I'm almost letting down everyone by being a part of it sometimes. Because I think Michael and I have a great banter and can get into some interesting topics for discussion. But what has happened is, I don't play Star Wars Destiny, which is ending. The trading card game that I had played, or the LCG that I had played, is already over. I play Armada, but there's barely anything coming out for it. I play Imperial Assault, but there's barely anything ever coming out for it. I have now gotten out of X-Wing entirely, which is new since the last time you saw one of these updates. I sold off my entire X-Wing collection to a gentleman who came down from South Carolina and got it all at once. All I kept is a handful, I think it's 3, of the play mats, because I use them for backgrounds when I do other videos. And I've already gotten out of Legion a while back. And those are the 2 big games right now for Fantasy Flight, X-Wing and Legion. And, there are video games to talk about, but not very frequently. So I feel like I can talk intellectually, intelligently about the video game market and the tabletop game market, because I tend to follow that stuff closely. I'm interested in it, but I'm not picking up everything at this point. So part of me feels like I will be a disappointment to continue on, but we'll just have to see. At this point, what's ironically kind of holding things up, me who rarely has the time to record, it's the fact that I may be able to record at some point, but he hasn't had time to actually get further into Jedi Fallen Order yet. And that's what we want to do our next episode on. So we're just kind of waiting to see what happens with that. As far as Star Wars Beyond the Films, there has finally been some progress. Woohoo! All right, on January 2nd, we posted episode 244. That is our episode on The Rise of Skywalker. So if you're looking for my thoughts on The Rise of Skywalker, I've decided that I'm probably not going to do the regular spoiler-free and then spoiler-filled YouTube vlog episodes that I used to do, because for some reason I feel like every time I try to sit down and do that, I need more notes. I need a chance to sort of organize my thoughts better. And I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do that until I have it on home video and can watch it repeatedly to really sort of sort out what I want to talk about with it. So it's nice to be able to bounce ideas off of someone else. So I'm happy to talk about it in those exclusive Nobility of the Butler Universe Q&A episodes, as we already have a little bit. And if you want to actually hear my thoughts on it at this point, you should check out the Star Wars Action News episode where they did the whole roundtable discussion of Rise of Skywalker, because I was a part of that. But then now, finally, with me and Mark Hurleman on Star Wars Beyond the Films, you can check out episode 244. That is our thoughts on Rise of Skywalker together. It's just the 2 of us talking about it, and we get a chance to go a bit in depth with it. Our plan for right now is that our next set of episodes are going to be the year in review episodes. We actually have already recorded the one on the books of 2019. We will then continue on to the comics, and then at least one more episode, and maybe two, depends on if we can fit all of the other stuff into one episode, but we probably will. And then after that, a feedback episode. After that, there has been a suggestion, and I think it's a good suggestion, that we do an episode that basically compares the post-Return of the Jedi stuff in canon versus the post-Return of the Jedi stuff in Legends, and how they differ, how they are similar, that sort of thing. It's granted not going to be able to be a fair comparison because you had a lot more years worth of material for Legends than in canon. It was around longer, it grew longer. And I think for both of us, we prefer that era within Legends, although I love the fact that we have new movies for canon and enjoy that as well. So it'll make for an interesting episode, I think, though we're going to have to lay out those things as caveats at the beginning to make sure that it's intellectually honest as we go through it. But that gets us, a ways down the line in terms of how many things we're going to be recording. I've said before that I feel like sometimes I may need to get out of the podcasting stuff just because I don't get a chance to record as often as I would like with others, but getting a chance to record helps refuel that energy, especially when recording with Mark. And I've got to say, I've been doing this since 2002 when it comes to the podcasting. And we've been doing Beyond the Films, I guess, 8 years now? I think the first episode was in January of 2012, after Andrew Loopy and I had finished up with EU Review. And, you get to know somebody well, though Mark and I have never met in person. And to give you a sense of the dedication that kind of goes around with this on his end, the last time we were recording, when we recorded for the books part of the year in review, which at this point is edited and just needs music and such added and posting by Mark. When we were recording that, we're about 15 minutes from the end, and his wife came downstairs, or I guess not downstairs, she came into his recording studio, his setup, in tears. And instead of telling him right then, she was just, I guess, kind of checking to see if he was still recording, and basically said, there's something up, but I'll tell you in a little bit, because if I tell you now, you're not going to want to keep recording. And went back upstairs, or however you want to describe it. We finished up within about 15 minutes, and afterwards, it turned out that his grandmother had passed away. And he is now dealing with all of that. That's why the episode isn't up yet, because he's dealing with the estate and all that kind of stuff with that. But instead of it being, here's something going on, immediately act on it, the atmosphere that's been created is one in which he and his family, or particularly his family around him, know that this means something to him, and he wants to follow through with it when it comes to things like the episodes being recorded. So I just found that kind of a striking thing. And, he's kind of like a brother to me in a fandom sense, even though we've never met, but we've been working together in this capacity for like 8 years, like I said. Knew him even before that. So, seeing that kind of thing, and I'm sitting here bitching about how, I just don't have time as often, and yet he's still recording through stuff like that happening. So it puts things in perspective a little bit, I think. So anyway, you'll have the episode sometime soon. It'll be 2:45. It'll have the books review, year in review thing for 2019. We have not got a chance to record any of the other parts of it yet, obviously. But once things kind of settle down on his end, he'll be getting that finished up and put up here. I would imagine probably before the next time we have one of these monthly updates. Beyond that, YouTube is where the bulk of my stuff tends to come out these days. Not a whole lot this month. I recorded a whole bunch of videos from the Star Wars Home Video Library back on January 12th, I think. But here we are 2 weeks later, a bunch of them still need to be edited. I think I've only gotten maybe 3 of them actually out since recording then. And I'm going to record a couple after I finish recording this. I just need to get the time to do more editing, frankly. But what we've seen since that last episode, I finally took the time to edit together my video on the game Proving Grounds. This is the Renegade solo series of games from Renegade Studios. Proving Grounds was the first game in that series. I went ahead and got that done and pushed that out because we were coming up right on the recently completed Kickstarter for the second game in the series called Warp's Edge. So that is up on the YouTube channel. Then, let's see. We had 3 episodes of From the Star Wars Home Video Library. We had one in which I showed off the lightsaber toys that came with the 2004 and 2005 bonus lightsaber action DVDs, because we'd already seen the ones from 2006 and 2007. And then there was a next episode where we took a look at actually these things here that you can see, which are example lightsaber toys from the toy line that also included the Lightsaber Battles mini DVDs that we had looked at recently. And then the last episode of From the Star Wars Home Video Library, actually released in the last month or so, was basically featuring the UK 1995 THX Remastered Edition boxed sets, aside from the Executor set we'd already looked at. So basically, those two up here on the end here, plus one that's behind them, that were all sent to me by Ricky Ray from over in Scotland, which is awesome, so we took a look at those. But yeah, a lot more still recorded that's not out yet. And then most recently, after a lot of re-exporting and fixing noise and stuff like that that kind of drove me nuts, I finally, a long while after I'd initially intended to do it, had the time to stop and take an evening, 3 hours between midnight and 3 a.m. one night, to record, and then spent the entire day yesterday basically doing editing to get an episode out, a video out on the game Master of Wills from Stormcrest Games. It's a really fun game. I enjoy the concept of it. It's really, really cool. If you're interested in it, just check out the video on the channel. But I wanted to make sure that that got out with still about a week left of time in the current Kickstarter for that game, where they're kickstarting an expansion called Blood Crown. I wanted to make sure that was out there because you had a lot of people asking about, well, what does it mean to be a completist in this? How do I get my hands on stuff? What exists? How does the game play? And I had a chance to actually finally get that put together. The fact that the Kickstarter was still going was what kind of kicked me in the butt to actually get it done. Kind of like editing Proving Ground thanks to the Warp's Edge Kickstarter being out there. I don't expect to be doing more with other games for a little while, so I can focus in on some backlog of From the Star Wars Home Video Library stuff and whatnot. But, you never know. It depends on what happens to tickle my fancy at the time or come in from a Kickstarter. I still need to do ones on things like Lifeform and whatnot. I just have not had the opportunity to do that. And lastly, what about the books and whatnot? No progress on the Wars stuff at all at this point, though I've got ideas. I think I know the general spine I want to use for the story, but I haven't had a chance to actually sit down and write anything yet. Then when it comes to From the Star Wars Home Video Library 2nd Edition, like I said, I've started working on that Patreon thanks page, updating the regular thanks page, and I have inserted the first of the new chapters as far as like creating a new spot for it, and started doing a little bit of writing, mainly for the intro of the chapter that's going to be called something along the lines of like Rise of 4K, Demise of 3D, kind of to play off the whole Rise of DVD, Demise of VHS, or vice versa, however I had named that previous chapter. Similar in concept, because this is where we're going to take a look at the home video releases of Last Jedi and Solo. As we start moving towards, another chapter, there'll be the more recent stuff with, Rise of Skywalker coming out soon, Skywalker Saga, plus all those reissues and whatnot back there. So I have started a little bit of the writing for it, but I'm still wanting to get most of the pictures done before I do that. But now that everything is actually within reach and nothing is hidden behind those, poster board type things anymore, now it's a little bit easier for me to just grab them and take pictures as I need them for the book. So if I'm recording this weekend, probably next weekend I won't record and I'll just take more pictures to get more of that done. Typically my one time to actually get anything like that done in here in my office without Cade underfoot tends to be on Sundays, because that's when my wife or father-in-law are watching him in another room. So, we'll see what I can get done, but I think pictures will be the next thing that I dive back into, because it's getting really close to having all the old pictures replaced. I just need to keep hammering away at it. There's still some I took last time that aren't edited and in there yet, but I know there's still more for me to take, even of the products that are already in the book, let alone the new stuff that is going to be inserted. So with that, thank you very much for your interest. I know kind of a slow month, but there is more stuff coming, definitely. Just waiting for us to get past all those Meet the Teacher calls and clear out that backlog of stuff to edit and whatnot and get back on the horse with podcast recording. Just trying to get to a point where hopefully as we get further along in this semester, things will ease up and we'll see more content able to roll out more frequently. But again, thank you all for your interest. Those of you who are backers on Patreon, thank you very much for that as well, and I'll see you in a month.